Since clothing is a part of culture, it is closely related to the social and cultural phenomena of each era. It is affected by the changes in politics, economy, ideology, and technology. A study of fashion influenced by dystopian ideas, which is a study by the Journal of the Korean Society of Clothing and Textile, studies the relationship between the concept of dystopia and the concept of dystopia by period and how that relates to the clothing and the fashion of that time. So essentially, it is studying the relationship of dystopia and how that influences fashion. A very small, very small modern day example of this would be NOID. NOID is a genderless fashion brand based in Los Angeles, which is by the YouTuber Denzel Dion, who himself tweeted that NOID stands for Dion spelled backwards, and when split stands for no ID, which is essentially what the brand stands for: genderless fashion and genderless expression. My initial thoughts when the brand launched was that I enjoyed the fact that it is a genderless and gender-neutral fashion brand that doesn't focus on making t-shirts and jeans, because usually when you think of genderless fashion and genderless androgynous fashion, it's usually like women in masculine clothing. So I appreciated the fact that it is a genderless brand that offers a wide array and a wide range of silhouettes, from tight dresses to pants, jackets and skirts. So it's not just a genderless fashion brand that's focused on t-shirts and jeans, because usually when you think of androgynous fashion and genderless fashion, it's usually like women in masculine clothing. The way that the general public, especially his core audience, received the brand was very different to the way that I received the brand. There was a lot of valid critiquing in his brand. The three main critiques were the fact that his brand is expensive, the clothes are ugly and or depressing, and the fact that there was not much representation in the sizing of the clothes and also in the launch pictures of the clothes, which I do agree with, because for a fashion brand that claims to be for everybody, majority of society was not represented in the pictures. It was very binary, very skinny. The pricing ranges from $150 to $450, which is very expensive. Like, not even for just an average person, it is an expensive brand. And this pricing places it in a mid-tier premium brand, which is above mass market, above your Zara's, your Mr. Prices, your fast fashion brands. Brands that are in this tier usually are like, the prices are justified by the quality of the clothing and the production cost of the clothing. But I cannot speak for NOID because I haven't touched the clothes, I haven't seen the clothes, I don't know how the clothes feel, I don't know how like strong and how durable they are, and I also don't know the production costs, so I cannot speak on that. But I would hope that for that sort of pricing, the clothes are ethically and sustainably made, and they are made with good materials, and they are made to be durable. But however, I do think that fast fashion and fast fashion prices has sort of warped our brains, including myself, has sort of warped our brains into thinking how long clothes are supposed to last, how much clothes cost, and how much they cost to make, which is an entirely different and complex, nuanced conversation that I'm not going to get to in this video. The comments made about how the clothes look, like the fact that the clothes are ugly and depressing and very like ugly, is sort of what inspired this video, and is sort of what inspired me to go down into like fashion inspired by dystopian ideas. The brand launched with 7 pieces: the cord top, the core cut top, the core cut top 2.0, the core cut dress in black, the core cut dress in gray, the cropped jacket, and the cropped pants. The comments about how the clothes looked had me going into like a deep dive of fashion inspired by dystopian ideas, and essentially it's what inspired this entire video. I want to preface the rest of this video by saying that Denzel himself has not spoken on the influence of these fashion brands, or from what I've seen, he hasn't spoken on the influence, he hasn't spoken about what inspired him. So these are just connections that are made on my own. He has not said anything about fashion inspired by dystopian ideas. I just want to get that out of the way. Why I say that the brand and the clothes look like it was inspired by dystopian ideas mainly has to do with the silhouettes and the colors. It looks like clothes that we'd be wearing in the future in the event of an environmental crisis. It also looks like the costume design of a post-apocalyptic post-apocalyptic world, movies like the Tomb Raider, you know, movies with that aesthetic and movies with that sort of theme, it looks like clothing that we'd wear in the event of that happening. And also when it comes to the colors, the khaki colors reinforce the depressing mood and the depressing feel of a dystopian future, and essentially of what we would wear in a dystopian future. It sort of feels like unintentional commentary on fashion inspired by dystopian ideas. The ideas of dystopia right now is the ongoing climate crisis that we have. I think this collection reflects that intentionally or unintentionally. I don't know what he was thinking. Yeah, those are sort of my thoughts on why I feel like this is a brand, or the first collection is fashion inspired by dystopian ideas, because it plays right into the themes of a dystopian future. Fashion inspired by dystopian ideas is not a new thing, or art or any forms of art, media, fashion inspired by dystopian ideas is not a new thing. It's something that has been going on. To get started with the whole history of fashion inspired by dystopian ideas, we have to define dystopia. Dystopia is an imagined state or society. It is the expression of fear should a negative situation occur in the future. The study of fashion influenced by dystopian ideas studies the relationship between dystopia and fashion and how fashion reflects dystopia. The study states that in the 1950s, the loss of humanity to an authoritarian state was the idea of dystopia. And this gave birth to fashion for freedom and self-realization, self-introspection, which was included in fashion and style. In the 1980s to the 1990s, a society ruled by monolithic power and the high-tech control of humans was regarded as dystopia, and this idea of dystopia gave birth and gave rise to cyberpunk. This idea of dystopia gave rise to the cyberpunk, which was depicted in the art, music, and movies of this time period, which involved movies that had technological elements to them. Cyberpunk essentially was or is an act of rebellion against these systems. The term cyberpunk was coined by the writer Bruce Booth-K, who wrote a book with the title in 1982. But the roots of cyberpunk obviously extend past his era with technological fiction that was written in the 1950s and 40s. It is derived from the term cybernetics, which is the replace of human functions by computerized ones, and punk, which is like a culture and holistic mindset and music that was amongst the youth in the 1970s and 1980s. Cyberpunk is a subgenre of science fiction that depicts science and technology in an urban dystopian future. It started as a literary moment, but it is now a culture. It is a culture with distinct style and anti-authoritarian, brand adverse, and tech literate. It is high-tech and low-life. With the rise of cyberpunk came movies such as The Blade Runner 1982 and The Matrix 1999, which expressed the Frankenstein syndrome, which is the fear that science and technology may be out of control and create disruptive power. Themes expressed in these films and these dystopian ideas influenced designers such as, according to Vanity Fair, Vivienne Westwood, who cites Blade Runner as the inspiration for her 1983 Punkature. And Alexandra McQueen's Autumn-Winter 1998 at Couture ready-to-wear. This collection pulled the dramatic film silhouettes as it referenced the Blade Runner 2. Vogue reports that at the time, Dior's fall 1990 show debuting in Paris 4 months after The Matrix, featuring shiny and figure-hugging leathers. The team states that they were deeply inspired by The Matrix. In the 2000s, the idea of dystopia was and is the ongoing climate crisis, and how this influenced fashion was we'd see, for example, collections or t-shirts with slogans that are related to the climate crisis, such as, for example, like save the planet, save the turtles, like don't litter, slogans like that. Or collections that featured materials that we'd have to wear and use in the event of an environmental crisis. Undercover Fall 2007. Yan Takahashi used material that radiates heat according to changes in body temperatures. It is an adaptable material that will be used in the events of extreme weathers. Dystopian ideas do not disappear and reappear, but are some things that we continually discuss. In the late 90s, the idea of humans being controlled was the idea of dystopia and is now re-emerging with the conversation of the government and or social media monitoring and following us and stealing our data. Dystopian ideas have continued to influence fashion, movies, and art. Fashion influenced by dystopian ideas expresses the fear that may arise should these current dystopian ideas persist. Dystopian ideas have inspired all forms of art. For example, films such as The Matrix, World War Z, and After Earth that have dystopian themes and dystopian futures that make use of technology to control humans, spreading viruses, or trying to survive post and environmental crises. Or fashion designers and fashion, for example, Alexander McQueen's apocalyptic views in his 2010 Spring-Summer collection, which is humans becoming apocalyptic creatures as sea levels rise due to melting glaciers. And unfortunately, Ready to Wear by Milk Studio and Lucas Sabat, which highlights how we'll adapt if we don't stop climate change, featuring fireproof jackets, smoke filtering bandanas, and storm warning headphones.
Not be a thing, but there's more money to make in destroying the environment than keeping it the way it is. I think it's more about like 2 or 3 generations down when like everything actually intensifies and like starts shifting. If it comes down to the world burning down, like who gives a shit about like a pair of jeans that looks cool? So it's about functionality, like making a fireproof jacket. That's why like the approach of it is less of an aesthetic design or like trying to make it look as cool as possible. It's trying to get it to be functional in multiple ways. Like I looked at it from a more like technical standpoint more than a fashion standpoint.